This Sunday on BBC Two, a nature special celebrates the whale with stunning pictures from a group of humpbacks to the magnificent blue whale.
This is the largest animal that has ever lived, far bigger than even the biggest dinosaur. The blue whale weighs up to 200 tons. It's capable of speeds up to 20 miles an hour. These are narwhals, unicorns of the sea. An Eskimo, or Inuit, sees them as a free dinner, a traditional pursuit, even though he may have an Arctic deep freeze full of beef burgers. Control of whaling has always been a pious hope. But back in 1982, the nations of the world finally agreed on a total ban to all commercial whaling. That ban was to take effect in 4 years' time. Now, in 1986, the 4 years are up, and it's time to put the resolution to the test.
Tony Soper reports on the battle for the whales this Sunday at 7:15 on BBC Two. This evening on Two continues now with more horticultural tips from the gardener's world.
We're off to Shepton Mallet in Somerset today to a cottage garden in the making and a gardener who really loves old-fashioned plants. Well, I'm going to give her a hand to get started, but I don't know about you, I'm not a great believer in growing plants just because they're old-fashioned. So I'm going to take down there some new varieties with an old-fashioned flavour. One of the plants that I do want to take down is by no means a new variety, Clematis orientalis, and this is of my own raising, and I raise them by layering. And if you've got a plant and you've got a friend you want to give plants to, this is the way to do it. What I'm doing, normally when you layer, you could quite easily pull a branch down to the ground and layer it in a pot in the ground. The great trouble with that is that that pot is going to need watering throughout the season. Now, if I were to put a pot in this border, the chances are it will get covered with foliage, I will forget it, it would dry out and the layer would die. So what I've done is to choose the brightest coloured pot I've got so that I'm not going to miss it, and I've wired it up onto the wires up here where I can quite easily see it. And now all you've got to do is get your sharp knife, and it must be sharp, and look at the underside of the stem there and where the leaf joint is, and just cut through into the leaf joint like that. You don't need to do much, that's plenty. The compost that I'm using in the pot here is in fact John Innes seed compost. Now, normally when I do layers I do them in a peat and perlite mix, but if you've got a bit of soil in, that is a bit of a buffer, and it allows you perhaps once just to forget the watering. It's not quite so critical as peat and perlite, which dries out very fast. Now I've got to hold that down into the compost, so I've made just a little wire staple here. You could use a hairpin if you like, anything would do, just to staple that down into the compost like that. Now that'll help hold it down, but on top of that I'm also going to put a fairly hefty old stone there. Now there are two reasons for putting that stone on, partly to hold it down into the compost, but mainly because underneath that stone the compost will be nice and moist, and that will again help prevent drying out. Most important. This will have rooted probably by about autumn time, and then it can be cut away from the plant and grown on, repotted probably, and grown up a stick and given away. Another job that I've got to get on with now is pruning the forsythia. There are one or two shrubs that flower on one-year-old wood. So this, in other words, is going to make flower on the wood that it makes this year. So therefore, what you do is you prune back all the branches that have flowered this year, and that gives it the maximum chance of making really long growths. And of course, the longer the growth, the more flower that you've got on it. Now this bush has got quite a lot of old wood on it. It's been a little bit neglected. So I'm going to take out some of that, but no more than about a third. You don't really want to knock it back too hard. And then wood like this, there's a nice new stem. That is going to be cut back to probably about 2 or 3 buds, right back fairly hard there. We'll do some in the front here as well. Right back fairly hard, so that that will give it plenty of chance to flower really well on long wood next year. Now there is another shrub actually that I've got in the border that many people don't realise needs pruning like that. And that is this Prunus tenella. This is one called Firehill, and it really has some superb flowers on it. Now, this again flowers on 1-year-old wood. Normally a shrub would be grown as a sort of a thicket of branches from the bottom, and you can prune those right back. But this one has been grown on a short stem here, that you can see. So I can't prune that right back down to the ground. Again, this one's got some old wood, so what I'm doing here is just purely to prune out the middle of it a little bit, again taking away no more than about a third of the old wood. In fact, I think that'll do. And then I will go round and prune just some of this wood that has flowered this year. And that'll give me plenty of flowers for next year. Oh, now this is what I really call the country. We're in the tiny hamlet of Bodden near Shepton Mallet in Somerset, at the home of Linda Meadows. The house is a little old stone-built cottage, and a delicious smell of cow muck fills the air. Mind you, even here in Somerset, it's been the same story as in most parts of the country, with lots of winter losses. Linda, I really would have thought that you people in Somerset could have made a better job of the weather for us.
Yes, it is awful, isn't it? And it's been like this for a while now, but you just got to put up with it and get on with it, really.
Makes a difference to the gardening, though, doesn't it?
Oh, yes, it certainly helps.
What have you been planting down there?
I've just been planting GM Lionel Cox. It's a nice cottage garden plant.
It's a lovely colour, and as you say, very much a cottage garden plant. And you're very much a cottage gardener, aren't you?
Yes, yes, I like the old traditional way of gardening, and I think the cottage needs a sort of cottagey garden to, you know, complete the picture.
Yes, I quite agree. I think, you know, that even if you've got a modern house, if you've got a very small garden, the idea of the old cottages to bung everything into the same border in that beautiful jumble is really very good for modern architecture too.
That's right.
And what's that one in the front there? There's another good cottage
Yes,
garden,
that's
isn't there?
Bellis prolifera hen and chickens.
Now, why is it called hen and chicken?
Because it's got the hen in the middle and the chickens all around it.
Oh, that's terrific, isn't it?
Isn't it pretty?
I love these old country names, you know, and that really is a very pretty plant. But there's another one with a good country name at the back of it. That's Bachelor's Button, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. That's Ranunculus acris flora plena. It's another old cottage garden plant. I think it goes back to the 16th century.
Now, you've got here a south-facing border, very sunny, very well-drained soil. They survive under that, do they?
Yes, yes, they do very well. I keep it topped up with some, you know, cow muck, and it certainly holds the moisture, and they do quite well.
Yes, yes, because you've got a lot of cow muck around here, haven't you? Yeah. Well, one that I think is probably going to do a little bit too well is this one here, the variegated ground elder.
Yes, it's very nice though. It covers nicely, comes over the wall nicely, but then the wall holds it in place, so it doesn't really get out of hand. I mean, I know it can get a bit vigorous, but if it does, I just pull a bit out.
Yes, I think that's the secret, isn't it? If you can contain it like that. I can tell you, I've just dug mine out actually because it caused me so many problems. But that's not a bad idea. Another feature of cottage gardens, of course, is the paving, and I love the way that you've softened it here with plants. Now, what's that one down there?
Yes, isn't it nice? That's Sedum rhodiola. It's very hardy, and it's a nice compact plant, and it would fit into any nice small cottage garden anywhere.
It looks really very cool in these sunny conditions, doesn't it?
Very
Super
nice.
plant, yes.
Nice plant.
But one that doesn't look cool down the bottom there, that euphorbia.
No, it's super red hot colour, isn't it? That's Euphorbia griffithii Fireglow. and it's certainly come through, out of all the euphorbias, that has done the best this year.
Has it really? Now, you see, I grow that one in very much a shady border, and you've got it facing the sun. I suppose it must be a plant that will put up with all sorts of conditions.
Well, yes, it actually comes from the Mediterranean region, so it will put up with, you know, quite a lot of sun. Yes.
Now, the back garden here is still very much in the process of development.
Yes, that's right. Yes, I'm trying to keep it as cottagey as possible, and I want to try and make it as if it's still in time, like the old cottage gardens were.
And I imagine, really, actually, that planting a garden like this is quite an expensive job.
Yes, it can be. You know, you get carried away, you see so many things that you like, and of course it builds up, you know, you spend quite a bit, yes.
Well, I've brought along a few plants with me today, which are essentially old-fashioned plants, but plants that have had the benefit of the modern plant breeder's art. And I notice also that you're collecting a few yourself.
Yes, that's right. That's Polygonum bistortum superbum. And I think it's, you know, it's very much in character with a cottage garden. It is derived from a native plant, from the bistort.
But very much an improvement,
yes,
isn't it? Now, that's going to make quite a big clump, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's ready to be split up now, I think, really. I shall have to pot it on and take it to some of the plant sales.
That's the way, and that will finance buying a few more plants
that's
too,
right.
won't it?
Yes, absolutely.
There's one over here that catches the eye, and that really is old as the hills, isn't it?
Yes, isn't it gorgeous? That's the Fair Maids of France. It's a real cottage garden plant, and it's the Latin name is Ranunculus aconitifolius flora plena. And it dates back
I think
to
I prefer Fair Maids of France, you know.
Yes, it's easy to say, yes. It dates back, it was introduced into this country about 1572.
Was it
from,
really?
From
It's
France.
that old?
Yes.
Well, I'm blown.
Isn't it lovely?
Lovely plant. That needs no improvement at all, does it?
No.
And the one over there too.
Yes, that's Cardamine latifolia. That's the single cuckoo smock.
Cuckoo flower, isn't it? A lady's smock.
Yes, that's right. The single form of it.
Lovely plant. And I like, I mean, not only are the flowers good, but the foliage is great too,
Very
isn't
fresh,
it?
yes. Very neat too. It doesn't spread too quickly.
And over this side, there's a flower that I haven't seen around for years, but must be as old as English gardens
yes,
themselves.
isn't it? This is the Old English tulip. I'm in the Old English Tulip Society, which has been going for quite a few years. And they send you bulbs every now and again, and this is one of them. Isn't it lovely? And it's later than the usual tulip. You know, that's why it's still flowering now, and a bit taller.
I know, I love gardens on 2 levels, you know. I think you're very lucky, actually, to have this. But these steps look a little bit stark, don't they?
Yes, they do, don't they? They're fairly new, and I think we really need something, you know, they need breaking up in some way.
You need planting on the sides, I think, and I've brought some plants along here, which I think are really going to soften the area quite a lot. This first one here is a new genista called Lemon Spreader, and that one absolutely thrives in sunshine. And of course, it'll get lots and lots of sunshine here, and it'll stay compact and dwarf like that and spread out and make a really nice mat on the side there. And then, as a bit of a contrast over this side, I thought a bit of blue with this little Veronica, and that should slot in there, and that'll tumble down over the sides of the steps and really look nice. Good foliage too, but not quite as good a foliage as this Achillea. This is a great favourite, and I think it's a lovely find too. Look at the flowers on that. They really are superb, really beautiful. And that, of course, has wonderful foliage too. And that'll form a mat of grey, which will just spread out over those steps and completely soften it. And then, one of my great favourites, quite a common plant, but really super, is Saponaria ossiomoides, the old soapwort. It's not a rare plant, but my goodness, it's a good one. That will form a large mat right the way across there. You never have to buy another plant of this. And every year, unfailingly, that'll be a complete mass of those lovely pink-purple flowers. Now, I've also brought some rock roses over there, which I think will do very well in this situation because they love a sunny spot.
That's right.
But I'm going to leave you to plant those, because the other thing we've got to think about is fruit. Now, Brian Basie, you're a nurseryman and a specialist fruit grower. Would you agree with me if I was to say that the traditional method of fruit growing is really out as far as small gardens are concerned.
Well, no, Geoff, I can't agree with that at all. There's a lot of work being done recently in producing compact trees and trees on dwarfing rootstocks, ideal for small gardens.
That's hardly the traditional method, but
Well, you take this. Now, here is a stellar cherry on a colt rootstock, just into its second year. And alongside it is a clonal variation of that one, a sport, you might say, compact Stella. Same rootstock, same piece of ground it was grown in, exactly the same age tree, and already he's nearly half the size of the other.
so this is
That's a compact form.
A compact form that has just arisen.
Yes.
Well, that is useful. Is that happening anywhere else in other fruits?
We have varieties such as Norfolk Royal Russet. Now, that's not out of a research station. That's an act of God in a parson's garden, funnily enough. But it's sported on a well-known old Norfolk variety called Norfolk Royal. And this has made an upright growing compact form.
And of course, apart from these compact forms, you can also get rootstocks which will actually dwarf the
Yes.
plant.
Yes. Now, here we have a plum. We haven't been able to have small plums, as you know, for many years. This is the dwarfing rootstock Pixie for plums. And this is a Victoria plum grafted there onto the Pixie rootstock.
My goodness. And now I've got a Victoria plum. It's an enormous tree. The other thing I must say is that it didn't fruit for about, what, 10 years, I suppose.
no,
And
well,
yet you've got little fruits on there.
This is a little 2-year tree. The bees weren't terribly active this year, but it had a lot of flower on it, but it's got quite a reasonable number of little plums.
And how big is that tree going to get eventually?
Well, probably not more than 12 feet. 10 or 12 feet,
Ideal
perhaps
for a
less.
small garden.
Yes.
You're doing funny things with it here. What's
Well,
all this?
we're doing a little game called festooning. We've tied the branches down with a piece of string, 3 or 4 of them, and the fact that they've been bent over like that, the old boys used to call it bending, has slowed down the flow of sap, so that as the hormones in the sap pass through the stem, they activate each bud, and each bud works for you, to do something for you. You don't get what they used to call sleepers.
That's really very good. It makes an attractive tree
Yes,
too,
you could
doesn't it?
have that in a tub.
Now over here, I've heard of dwarf apples, but this is getting ridiculous.
This
What
is
are these?
ridiculous. Now this is M27, nothing to do with the motorway, M27 dwarfing rootstock for apples. And what we're doing here is making an edging. We're calling them step-over trees. Edging to a border. Behind the border, behind the trees, you can grow your lettuces or your strawberry plants.
Oh, so it's like the old box hedging or a bit of lavender,
Yes.
but much more productive.
Yes, the box hedging just bred slugs.
So how do you do it?
Well now, this is the M27 rootstock. There is the maiden tree, which before it was pruned down was up here somewhere. Chopped down to there, the beginning
would you do
end
that?
of the winter, beginning of the spring. And these are the growths being made already this summer, 1986. Alongside it we have a tree which is 1 year older. Here are the 2 shoots, one that way, which were made last summer. Now making little spurs and even thinking about a couple of apples. And here we have a tree 1 year older again, which has got some quite useful spurs. 12 apples on each side of the tree.
And can you buy these trees already trained like
Yes,
that?
yes. Or you can have a bit of fun, do it yourself, buy a maiden tree, a 1 year tree, ready to chop down and train them out yourself.
Excellent, and what a very decorative feature too.
And fun, you see.
Yeah.
I like people to think
I know
there's fun
you do.
growing fruit.
Well, another decorative way of growing is like that one at the back.
Yes, now
there.
that's a fan-trained Jupiter. Nice shape, very pleasant to look at. Very fruitful in a year's time. You can see the fruit buds forming now to make apples next year.
Now they are a little bit complicated to train, aren't they? Is it possible to buy those
Yes.
as ready trained trees?
Yes, you buy them as a 2 year or possibly a 3 year fan-trained tree ready to plant out.
One of the things that has always been difficult with fruit growing is that with apples particularly you need a pollinator.
Yes.
Now that means you've got to have 2 trees. Supposing you've got a tiny garden and only space for 1 tree.
Well, I think the answer then is a family tree, Geoff. This is 3 trees grafted on 1 stem. In this case, you've got a tree which was grafted down there, made a tree to there, and 2 branches were grafted over where the coloured bands show which they are.
Of different varieties?
Of different varieties. So you've got 3 on the one tree. And of course they should be of equal vigour.
I see. So you don't get one taking over the whole tree eventually?
No, you put, if you want to grow strong varieties, then you put 3 strong ones on one tree, or 3 weak ones on one tree.
Good idea, and of course you get a continuance of cropping that way,
Yes.
don't you? Now another way of doing it that is a great favourite of mine is with cordon apples, because you
Yes.
can plant them much closer, can't you?
Yes. Very good idea, of course, is to make a vertical feature in the middle of the garden, not necessarily on your boundaries. Either some sort of framework or like a gate or something. And you can grow them upright, or you can grow them at an angle. But whichever way you grow them, have them on a semi-dwarfing rootstock and allow them to make spurs all the way up. And every now and again you do a summer prune as well as a winter prune perhaps twice in the year. Keep pruning them back to little spurs.
Now you keep talking about buying these things on semi-dwarfing rootstocks. Can you go to the nursery and actually specify the rootstock you
Yes.
want?
When you're buying fruit trees these days, you don't just buy the fruit tree of your choice, you specify the rootstock.
Yeah, yeah. Now that one is a plum, isn't it?
That's a plum.
I've never heard of cordon plums, I must say.
No, well, they didn't. It's only recently you've been able to do cordon plums, because on the older, more vigorous rootstocks, a plum would very quickly get out of hand. You could not control it. But now we've got the pixie dwarf rootstock for plums, we can control it.
So again, ask for pixie.
Yes.
This one is a red currant, obviously. Now that's not grown on a rootstock, is it?
No, that's grown from a cutting on its own roots. So you do have to thin out or remove the roots, the shoots rather, that come from below ground.
And it's grown in exactly the same way
Exactly
as a
the
cordon
same way,
apple?
just take a main stem up and allow the side shoots to form and make spurs.
And when would you be pruning that?
You would prune that twice again, once in the summer, July, August time, and once again in the winter.
I see, yeah. Right, so it's quite obvious then that it is possible, even if you've got a tiny garden, to grow quite a lot of
Yes,
fruit, really.
yes.
But supposing you haven't got a garden at all, supposing you've got, say, a balcony or a patio.
Well, I think we've got to start with tubs then, Geoff. Now here's another example of a bit of fun we can have. There's a M27 rootstock for an apple growing in a tub, grafted over to a James Grieve, nice little tree chopped down at about that height, trained out half a dozen horizontal branches. A bit of fun, a couple of dozen apples.
And is that really going to last a long time in that tub?
Oh yes, you feed it, of course. Like an old nurseryman said to me once, the plants are only like us humans. If you give them a good bed to lie in and good food to feed on, they're happy.
What sort of food would you give them? Not
Well,
egg and chips,
You
I
can
take
give
it.
them, no, not those sort of chips. A fertilizer that when you're giving your roses a dose would do them well.
Something with high potash
Yes,
in it,
or
yes.
if you want to do a liquid feed, a high potash liquid feed would help as well.
And this one, that's new
now
to
this
me.
is something very new. This is the tummleberry. And just as the River Tummel is a tributary of the River Tay, so the tummleberry is a progeny of the Tayberry. I think you could grow that in the tub. I don't see why not. Here are some bamboo canes holding the shoots out.
Is it more compact than the tayberry?
It's more compact than Tayberry. It's a similar sort of fruit. It's a week or two later.
Got to
Slightly
say
different
that
taste.
I have never seen the fruit of the tummleberry.
No, well, I have to admit this is so new. I haven't either, Geoff, but I brought a tin with me today. Here they are, out of the tin.
Let's give them a try.
Yes. Now then, what do you think?
Delicious.
Yeah, good. It's lost that acid flavour that Tayberry had.
Well, I've been talking to Bonham. Linda's been busy planting out there. Let's see what she's done. Well, you only have to follow your nose to find the first group that she's planted, because the fragrance from this corner is nothing short of overpowering. These roses are a perfect example of how plant breeders have taken an old variety and improved it no end. Now, look at that flower. Nothing could be better, I think, a better example of an old-fashioned rose. Look at that lovely cabbagey shape. And yet this is a brand new variety. And the reason is this, that although old-fashioned roses have this superb shape, superb colour and superb fragrance, they don't flower for very long. So what the plant breeders have done is to take the old varieties and cross them with the modern perpetual flowering varieties to get the best characteristics of both. Okay, they've had to throw thousands of them on the rubbish heap, of course, but here and there they've come up with a real gem, and this is one, I think, which has all the best characteristics of the old roses and will flower right the way through the summer too. Here's a very good example. This is an old-fashioned damask rose. Now, you couldn't wish for better than that, I don't think, in a little cottage garden. Lovely shape, lovely colour, and the fragrance is superb, but it doesn't flower for very long. And now, look at that. Again, a superb damask rose, but this one is in fact a modern variety, and it has all those good characteristics, but it will flower for a long time too. They're called English roses, these, and I think that they're a great advance on the old-fashioned ones. This is the latest introduction, appropriately called English Garden. And look at that lovely shape and the lovely colour. I think they're really good. It's a little bit short on perfume, although there is some, but worth growing just for that colour and shape alone. And here's another example of inspired plant breeding. The old Russell lupins have been around a long time, and because they've been around a long time, they were beginning to get old and tired and losing vigour. So here, what the plant breeders have done is to take them and breed into them new life, new vigour, and a lot of new colours too. They're much more robust and vigorous. They have much longer flower spikes, and they flower right from the top to the bottom like that. And look, I don't need to say anything about the colours, just take a look at them. These are new generation lupins, and this is the latest colour. Wonderful, I think, and it's been called after my own garden. This one is called Barnsdale, so I'm feeling very smug and self-satisfied. Perhaps I'd better move on quickly. There are hundreds of cottage garden plants, of course, that need no improvements at all. This one is as old as the hill, it's Cyanoglossum. But just look at the blue of those flowers. Now, you'd only equal that blue with a gentian. Gentians are quite hard to grow, but this one is as easy as anything. So that's one really to look out for. And another one that's been around a long time but seems to have been ignored for some reason is this Cytisus lena. It's a lovely compact plant, and look at those flowers too. That one has now been reintroduced, and you can find that in garden centres, a really good plant, I think. Herbs are things that the cottagers have grown in their cottage gardens since time immemorial. They grew them, of course, for culinary and for medicinal purposes, but we want them in our gardens now for use in the kitchen. But there's no need for herbs that are not particularly attractive. Just look at these chives, for example. Two types of giant chives here, which you can find quite easily. They look much better and they taste just as good in the kitchen. The sage as well, a couple of different types of variegated sage which make very attractive plants and taste just as good. Well, those are all plants for the sunny border, but here we've got partial shade, so you've got to choose really different subjects. But here again, there are some good improvements. Have a look at this Solomon's seal. It's got the same lovely arching habit of the ordinary Solomon's seal and the same beautiful pendulous white flowers, but it's also got variegated leaves, so that means that it's really pretty for the whole of the season. Another good foliage plant is the hosta, and there are lots of new hostas coming in now from America. Look at this one, Shade Fanfare. Makes a really lovely variegated clump. And in front of that, another small one called Halcyon, which is, has got super pointed leaves and probably the best flowers, I think, that I've ever seen on a hosta. Now, these come from California, and the Californians say grow them in shade, but you've got to remember that Californian shade is in Croydon full sunshine. So, in other words, here you can grow them almost anywhere, sun or shade. At the back of that is this little wood rush, which I think is really wonderful. And those flowers, that'll form quite a nice little clump. And those flowers, which look really nice in the border, are also very good for drying and cutting. Over there, a great favourite of mine, the pink cow parsley. Going over just a little bit now, but looks super in about May time, and that will form quite a nice clump. And in front of that, another cool mauve colour is the phlox. Now that one will run a little bit in the border, but not nearly as vigorously as the ordinary border phloxes, and so therefore it's very much easier to control there. Well, I think it's looking pretty good, Linda, don't you?
Yes, doesn't it look nice? It's lovely and cool, and I especially like that potentilla, isn't it lovely?
It is nice, isn't it? It's surprising, really, how in these shady borders you really want to put white and green in, I think, don't you? Because
Yes.
it makes it this lovely sort of cool situation. And that one, as you say, is a real little aristocrat.
Gardener's World visits Luton at 8:30 next Friday.